There are bruises that don't show up on skin, and sometimes the most devastating damage doesn't involve yelling or hitting or leaving visible scars. It happens quietly, over time, behind closed doors or even in public, with a smile. Psychological abuse is one of the most misunderstood, downplayed, and yet emotionally crippling forms of harm. What makes it even more dangerous is how invisible it can be, not just to outsiders, but to the person experiencing it. This video breaks it all down. No fluff, no dramatics, just clarity. Every major type of psychological abuse explained, so you can finally name what's been happening to you or someone you love. Sometimes just putting words to it is the first step to finally breaking free. Let's go. Type 1, gaslighting. The first type is gaslighting. This isn't just lying. It's a calculated, often long-term pattern of making someone question their own reality. You start to wonder if your memory is faulty, if your feelings are too much, or if maybe you really are just being dramatic. You second-guess your instincts, your emotions, even your own experiences. Over time, you find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, minimizing your own reactions, and depending on the abuser to tell you what's true. And the scariest part is that it rarely starts with something huge. It's often small corrections, subtle denials, and little digs that eventually make you doubt everything about yourself. Type 2, silent treatment. Another common form is the silent treatment. This isn't someone taking space to cool off during an argument. This is someone deliberately withholding communication, affection, or attention in order to punish you or control you. You might go hours, days, or even weeks feeling invisible, not knowing what you did wrong, not knowing how to fix it, constantly trying to earn your way back into good graces. It turns love into a reward system, where silence becomes the consequence for non-compliance. Type 3, constant criticism. Then there's the slow burn of constant criticism. It doesn't always sound harsh or cruel. It might even be disguised as helpful advice or concern. But over time, you start to notice that everything you do feels wrong. Your choices are always questioned. Your efforts are never enough. You're made to feel like a burden or a disappointment. This isn't constructive feedback. It's a slow erosion of self-worth, designed to make you feel incapable without the abuser's input. Type 4, guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is another tactic, an emotionally manipulative way of making you feel responsible for someone else's feelings or behaviors. You find yourself walking on eggshells to avoid upsetting them. You start to feel like you're the reason they're sad, angry, or withdrawn. And when they mess up, somehow it's still your fault. It forces you into the role of emotional caretaker, always adjusting yourself so they don't get upset, while ignoring your own needs in the process. Type 5, blame shifting. Blame shifting is a close cousin to that. It's when someone refuses to take accountability and instead flips every problem back on you. They lash out, and suddenly you're the one who pushed them too far. They break boundaries, and somehow you're too controlling or too sensitive. The goal is to keep you focused on fixing yourself so they never have to fix anything. You're stuck trying to improve your behavior for a situation you didn't even cause. Type 6, triangulation. Triangulation is a more indirect but incredibly toxic strategy. This is when a third person, real or imagined, is brought into the mix to undermine your self-worth. They might compare you to someone else, suggest that others agree with their negative views of you, or use outside opinions to validate their mistreatment. You end up feeling isolated and paranoid, unsure of who to trust, and desperate to prove your value. Type 7, love bombing and withholding. A particularly confusing and addictive cycle is love bombing followed by withdrawal. In the beginning, you're everything. The affection is overwhelming. The attention feels like a dream, and the bond seems magical. Then, out of nowhere, the warmth disappears. You're left cold, anxious, and wondering what you did wrong. The cycle trains your brain to crave the highs so much that you tolerate the lows. It creates emotional dependency by attaching love to unpredictability. Type 8, intellectual dismissal. Dismissiveness is another subtle yet devastating tactic. This shows up when your thoughts, emotions, or concerns are routinely ignored or minimized. You're told you're overreacting, making things up, or being too emotional. Over time, this convinces you that your feelings don't matter, or worse, that they're unreliable. You stop speaking up, You silence yourself before anyone else can, because you've learned that's the only way to avoid being invalidated. Type 9. Threatening behavior without violence. Psychological abuse also includes threats and intimidation, but not in the way most people expect. It doesn't always sound aggressive. It could be subtle, but chilling reminders that there are consequences if you don't comply. Maybe they threaten to leave, take something important from you, or turn others against you. These kinds of threats keep you afraid, not of physical harm necessarily, but of emotional devastation, isolation, or losing your sense of stability. Type 10. Financial control. Then there's economic control, which is often overlooked. It's when one person takes control over all financial decisions, resources, or opportunities. You may be discouraged from working, kept out of conversations about money, or forced to account for every cent you spend. Financial dependence becomes a leash, one that's hard to see and even harder to break. If someone controls your access to money, they often control your ability to leave. Type 11. Infantilization. Another tactic is infantilization. This is when you're made to feel incapable, like you can't make your own decisions, handle your own problems, or function without guidance. They may take over tasks without asking, talk down to you, or constantly remind you how much you need them. It chips away at your independence and convinces you that autonomy is dangerous or impossible. Type 12. Projection. Projection is another major pattern. This happens when the abuser takes the parts of themselves they refuse to face. Dishonesty, insecurity, cruelty, and accuses you of them. They lie and call you a liar. They cheat and accuse you of disloyalty. This constant deflection keeps the spotlight off of them and on you. You become so wrapped up in defending yourself that you don't even realize you're being manipulated. Type 13. Rewriting history. There's also something called retrospective abuse, where the abuser rewrites history to fit their narrative. They deny events that clearly happened or twist the details so that they look innocent and you look unstable. You find yourself questioning your memory, even when you're sure of what you experienced. It's a psychological tactic designed to disconnect you from your own truth, and it's incredibly disorienting. Type 14. Emotional withholding. Emotional withholding is another deeply damaging form, when someone deliberately withholds love, affection, or basic emotional support, unless you're acting exactly how they want. It's not just cold, it's calculated. You're forced to perform a certain version of yourself to be accepted. You start hiding your real thoughts and feelings because you've been trained to associate honesty with punishment. Type 15. Victim role. Finally, there's the constant flipping of the victim role. You bring up your pain, and somehow they become the one who's suffering. You express concern, and they accuse you of being dramatic or unfair. You set a boundary, and they say you're attacking them. They hijack the narrative so you're always the villain, and they're always the wounded one. It leaves you confused, exhausted, and constantly apologizing for the harm done to you. The truth is, psychological abuse doesn't have to be loud to be dangerous. In fact, it's often the quiet forms, the subtle manipulation, the emotional neglect, the hidden power games that leave the deepest damage. If anything you heard in this video felt familiar, that's not an accident. And you're not being too sensitive. You're finally seeing what's been hidden in plain sight. If this video helped you name something you've been carrying, don't leave quietly. Hit the like button. It tells the algorithm this content matters. And more importantly, it pushes this information to people who need it just as much as you did. Subscribe to this channel if you want more brutally honest, emotionally validating content. No fake positivity, no sugarcoating. And let me ask you something. Which one of these types hit the hardest? Drop the number in the comments, 1 through 15. You don't have to explain. Just seeing your number could make someone else feel less alone. And if you haven't seen my last video, Every Trauma Response Explained in 8 Minutes, go check that one out next. It connects the dots between what was done to you and how you learned to survive it. Thanks for being here. For real, we're just getting started.